Kieran Vell never believed in the stories. Not the old Earth myths or the hyperromantic vid-dramas that ran late at night on interstellar feeds. He didn't believe in fated meetings or love at first scan, or that thing people whispered about, how some hearts were designed to beat in tandem across stars. Those were fantasies. And Kieran was a linguist, not a dreamer. Well, not much of one. He came to sell this for one reason only, to study resonance. Selthasans, with their shimmering skin and wordless way of speaking, communicated through emotional frequencies, pulses of feeling that translated into rich, layered meaning. No verbs. No tenses. Just waves of essence. It fascinated him. Enough to accept a 6-month placement on a planet where the air tasted like damp moss and nothing was ever said out loud. It was supposed to be a clean, academic posting. Then he met her. "You're not syncing properly." The voice in Kieran's earpiece was clinical, bored. It belonged to his research assistant, a voice model from the Earth Linguistics Guild, optimized for clarity. Not warmth. "That's impossible," Kieran murmured, adjusting the neural headband on his temple. "I'm reading perfect calibration." "You're reading input, not emotional reciprocity," the voice corrected. "Your signal is mismatched. Anomalous feedback loops. Subject Delta 9's waveforms are glitching." Kieran turned his eyes to the garden beyond the observation dome. Narine of Selthis stood among the vine lanterns, her aura pulsing softly in shades of twilight blue. The color denoted serenity. She stood still, graceful, untouched by wind. Selthisan Flora bowed toward her naturally, as if pulled into orbit by an unseen gravitational charm. To anyone else, she would have appeared flawlessly composed. To Kieran, she felt wrong. Not dangerous. Not angry. Just uneven. Off rhythm. As though there was static beneath her calm. A fluttering chaos hiding behind a mask of stillness. "What's causing the glitch?" he asked, more to himself than the assistant. "Possibly the human," the voice said drily. "Our emotional spectrum lacks their full nuance. Or perhaps Delta 9 is masking." "Selthasans don't mask," he muttered. "Unless they want to." And with that, the voice cut off. He shouldn't have gone to her. Every regulation in the interspecies interaction guide warned against casual contact. Emotional entanglement was a disciplinary offense, especially with empaths. One wrong move, and you could overwhelm or destabilize an entire Selthasan commune. But Kieran couldn't stop watching her. And on the 5th day, he walked through the haloed gateway into the heart of her garden, heart hammering like it hadn't since he was 16 and kissed that art student in a gravity-free elevator. "Hello," he said aloud, a courtesy she wouldn't need. Narine turned. He saw it then, the exact moment her aura flickered. Not from recognition. But from something else. Something like surprise. And beneath it, curiosity. "Your presence is noted," she said, her voice emerging from a nearby translator crystal, humming like wind through bamboo. Kieran gave a short bow. "I'm Kieran Vell, linguist. From Earth." "I know," her aura was steady again. A calm lake. He sat cross-legged a respectful distance away. "You don't resonate properly with others," he said. Her head tilted slightly. Selthasans rarely changed expression. Most emotion lived in their pulse auras. But this time, her mouth curved, barely. "Is that your scholarly assessment?" she asked. "No," he said honestly. "It's just something I feel." A pause. "Then, I resonate differently with you." Over the next 2 weeks, Kieran became her shadow. Always at the garden's edge, sometimes within. They sat in silence often, Selthasan etiquette, and sometimes exchanged slow, thoughtful observations. Not quite conversation. Something deeper. Something closer to mutual observation with emotional permission. Kieran brought her Earth things. A faded paperback novel. A recording of whale song. Once, a carved piece of obsidian he claimed held human sadness. She accepted them all with a kind of reverence, and when she held the obsidian, her aura turned violet. "You feel grief," she said, not asking. He looked at the stone in her palm. "I lost my brother when I was 12. Her eyes didn't blink. "You carry him still." Kieran nodded. "I don't know how not to." She reached out, not touching his skin, just hovering her hand near his temple. Her aura glitched again. Gold. Then static. Then back to blue. "You want to be seen," she said quietly. He nodded again, slower this time. "I want to be known." On the 30th day of his assignment, he brought a gift that broke the silence between them forever. A handmade resonance tuner, something he'd built using borrowed Selfison tech and a strand of his own neural code. "It's imperfect," he warned, offering it like an offering. "But it might help us bridge." Narine stared at it. "You made this for me?" "I made it for us," he corrected. She took it. Placed it gently between them. Activated it with a breath. And something shifted. Not the air. Not the space. The feel of them. A soft hum ran between their bodies, linking his imperfect emotions to her radiant, alien spirit. And for the first time, she smiled. Really smiled. Like it surprised her. "You're so loud," she whispered, her voice raw and full of wonder. "Your emotions are like oceans. Too many waves. Too many suns inside one mind." "You should see me on a bad day," he said, breath-catching. And yet. Your chaos makes me feel calm." Later, when the moons had risen and all other research teams had gone to sleep, she came to his quarters. He didn't ask how she got past the security systems. Selfisons moved as they wished. "May I share a link?" she asked. His throat dried. "What kind?" "An emotional merge. A temporary sync. Nothing permanent." He wanted to say yes. But more than that. He wanted to feel her. He nodded. She stepped closer. Placed 2 fingers on his chest. His heart stuttered. And then. He was her. Not entirely. But enough. He saw her childhood, soft canopies, the death song of her bond kin. The fear she carried, sharp and hidden like a thorn behind her aura. He saw the moment she first saw him, a blur of human light in a garden of steady minds, and felt her startled fascination. And she saw him. His grief. His hope. The way he buried loneliness beneath jokes and quotes and long hours of pretending to study. When the link faded, they stood trembling. Neither said anything for a long time. Then she touched his hand. Not by accident. Not culturally. But with meaning. "I thought humans were shallow," she said softly. "And I thought Selfisons didn't feel," he replied. "We don't," she said, "until someone cracks the silence." Kieran reached up, touching her face. His fingers barely brushed her skin. "Was that me?" Her aura pulsed once. Bright gold. Yes. They didn't kiss. Not that night. But when she left, she turned back at his door and said, "Your smile, it glitches something in me." He grinned. "That's my specialty." And for the first time in her life, Narine of Selvis laughed. Not a sound. But a shiver of color. Joy made real. Made visible. Made human. An emergency maintenance station orbiting the collapsed orbital arc between Mars and Europa, a dead zone of shattered satellites and obsolete human colonial debris. The place is a graveyard of lost voices and disconnected histories. Vena Sar wasn't supposed to be here. Not on orbit 12b, not on a crumbling station built from the bones of an abandoned mining ring, not living off freeze-dried lentils and recycled oxygen, and certainly not living in complete, bone-deep silence beside an alien who hadn't spoken a word in 17 days. But exile was like that. One moment you're writing love poems into your maintenance reports, and the next, the colony board slaps your file with psychological deviation and dumps you into a floating trash heap with a wrench and a sleep pod. She hated it. Not the silence. The emptiness. She had learned to love silence years ago. The soft kind. The stillness between verses. The weightless feeling of being suspended in orbit and not needing to be anything for anyone. But this silence wasn't peace. It was weight. A gravity that made everything feel heavier. And at the center of it was Taller. Her assigned cohabitant. Her only tether to another living mind. And the most frustratingly beautiful being she had ever met. The Noquin did not speak. Their language was vibration. Tap rhythms through shared surfaces. Pulses through metal, stone, skin. Communication without air. Taller didn't look like any species she'd worked beside before. Tall, plated in armor that grew like living shale. His body pulsed faintly, a kind of subharmonic hum, like the deep bass of a forgotten instrument. His hands were long and jointless, designed for sculpting asteroids into homes. He was a star mason. And he was the quietest thing she had ever loved. Though she hadn't told him yet. Not that she could. Not really. They had developed a system. A crude one. She would tap her messages onto the shared table. Drink? Repairs? Sleep soon. And he would answer in vibration, a resonance through the metal that her body had begun to interpret instinctively. But one night, when the station's gravity field glitched and she floated for 4 full minutes in a dim-lit hallway, she had panicked. Not because of the danger. But because for the first time, she realized how alone she truly was. How fragile. How small. When the artificial gravity returned and she dropped hard to the floor, she curled in on herself and cried. Not loudly. Just enough that her breath fogged the inside of her rebreather mask. And somehow. He felt it. He came. Didn't say a word. Didn't vibrate or hum or knock. Just sat beside her. In total silence. He pressed one hand against the floor beside her shoulder. His body thrummed like a broken harp string. And her tears stopped. Because she could feel what he was saying. You are not alone. After that, their communication evolved. She began writing tactile poetry on magnetic slates, lines of silent verse made from arranged iron dust and tension patterns. No words. Just emotion. Rhythm. Shape. Taller would respond by changing the walls of the station. Rearranging panels. Carving abstract grooves near the airlocks. Art that only she could read. One morning, she found her breakfast ration folded into a spiral, a perfect mimicry of the orbital loop she'd once written about. Gravity is a loop that always brings you back to the same ache. He had read her. Not with eyes. Not with mind. But with resonance. On day 39, the hull cracked. Vena heard it first, a sharp snap like glass under pressure. The seal near the life support processor fractured, releasing a hiss of air and a cascade of alarm lights. She ran. Tools in hand, heart in her throat. But Taller was already there. His plated hands pressed against the breech, body humming deep and slow. Not panic. Something else. A tone she hadn't felt before. Calm. You're gonna get spaced, she hissed, falling to her knees beside him. Move, I've got a patch. But he shook his head. And then, using only the wall and his fingers, he tapped the first full sentence she ever received from him. Your hands fix the world, but mine will hold it until you can. She stared at him. And for a single moment, forgot how to breathe. They didn't speak the next 3 days. Not because they were angry. Because something between them had broken open. A gravity had formed. Unspoken. Mutual. Inescapable. She began sleeping closer to the thermal vents, where he often lingered during power rotations. At night, when she closed her eyes, she could feel his pulse humming through the floor. Not just proximity. A promise. On the night the beacon failed, the last tie they had to the outer rings, she panicked again. She couldn't stop it. Trapped air. Broken light. Floating in dark, unknown space with no clear way to send a message out. No way home. And he came again. But this time, he didn't just sit beside her. He reached out. Pressed his palm to her sternum. A deep vibration ran through her bones. Not painful. Not invasive. Just. Warm. Steady. She gasped. And felt herself pulse in response. His second sentence came not through taps. But through their bodies. We are orbiting each other. And she laughed. A sound that surprised them both. You're kind of romantic for a sentient boulder, she whispered. He didn't understand the words. But he felt the joy in them. And responded with a soft frequency, barely there. Like a heartbeat in the dark. They kissed 2 days later. No lips. Just touch. His hands cupped her face, hers found the hollow curve between the plates on his chest. Their vibrations aligned. A harmonic sync. And for the first time, the silence wasn't heavy. It was full. Full of everything neither of them could say aloud. But both had been screaming in their hearts. And in that gravity. They fell. Not downward. Not apart. But into something bright and unbreakable. A tether between bodies. A language of two. The interior of a drifting biodome called the Lyran Coil, located far outside mapped space. It was once a self-sustaining garden station, now overrun by decayed roots, flickering lights, and fragile air. The driftkind believe it sacred, a place where lost loves go to bloom in death. Mara Juno hadn't expected to find anything living inside the Lyran Coil. The drift record said it had failed years ago. That the station's heart garden had collapsed. Oxygen systems degraded. Life signs, zero. And yet here she was. Standing ankle-deep in bioluminescent moss that still glowed when she moved. Vines curled down from the broken domes like frozen green waterfalls, and something about the air made her skin itch in a way she hadn't felt since childhood. She took a breath through her filter mask. Moist. Full of memory. Alive. Her boots echoed softly as she stepped into the main atrium, a great rotunda once designed to mimic a rainforest canopy. Now it was shadow and shimmer, half collapsed and overtaken by the wild. Strangler roots curved around railings. Flowers bloomed from cracks in the floor. Mara dropped to her knees. Hands trembling. She had lived 5 years chasing ghosts of things humans had abandoned, exoplanets stripped for minerals, space habitats gutted after war, greenhouses full of withered hope. But here. A garden had survived. Without them. She should have been thrilled. Instead, she cried. Because something here felt sacred. Something she had no right to touch. You are weeping in holy ground, a voice said softly. She froze. Turned. And saw him. Tall. Luminous in shades of seafoam and starlight. Skin that shimmered like shifting tides. Long limbs, not quite symmetrical. 2 eyes, yes, but no mouth. His voice came not from lips, but from the air around her, tuned like wind through leaves. Driftkind. Sorry, she said, standing too fast. I didn't know anyone else was here. Few are permitted, he replied. Fewer still are welcomed. She took a slow step back. I can leave. He tilted his head. Something in his glow pulsed, not hostile. Curious. You carry grief, he said. This place calls to those who bloom in loss. She stared. And you are? Sylvan, he said. He did not offer a hand. But bowed. A ripple of pale blue light across his shoulders. She had never seen anything more beautiful. They didn't speak much at first. He didn't like words. They flatten things, he said. Make emotion sound like math. Instead, they worked. Together. She catalogued soil nutrients. Tested water flow. Grafted new vine root into the old lattice of irrigation lines. He showed her where the sacred plants grew, heart vine, ghost bloom, the luminous orchids that only opened in silence. Each evening, they'd sit beneath the old skylight, now half obscured with ferns. He would hum low vibrations into the air, tones that reminded her of lullabies sung to plants back on Earth. And she would sketch. Not the garden. Him. Because every day, his colors changed. Depending on how close he sat. How long he watched her. On the 23rd day, she touched his hand. Not by accident. Not professionally. Just. Because. It was after a long day of clearing root clogs from the West Canal. Her arms ached. Her mood was low. She had cut her palm and was bleeding, slowly, when he appeared beside her, hands glowing soft with bio-light. He didn't ask. Just took her hand. And healed it. She expected cold. His skin was warm. Not like human warmth. More like a sunrise. When she didn't pull away, he looked up. And for the first time, she saw a flicker of gold in his aura. A signal she hadn't seen before. What does that mean? She asked. He looked down at their hands. The garden has chosen, he said simply. They kissed beneath the pulse fruit tree. The one whose roots he said were planted by a pair of lovers who died in orbit but had their ashes scattered in its soil. The tree was said to bloom only once per generation, and only when two souls recognized each other as a matched pair. The night she told him about her ex. The betrayal. The way her work had been stolen, her name erased from the discovery credits. He said nothing. Just placed her hand on the pulse fruit tree's bark. And watched. As it bloomed. In silence. 3 flowers, pale and trembling, opened across its center. It's blooming, she whispered, stunned. You have been seen, he said. And when their foreheads touched, light danced across the soil. A language of its own. Not quite words. But it said. You are not forgotten. You are not alone. You are loved. But paradise never stays untouched. On the 30th night, a human salvage crew pinged her beacon. Bio-signature detected. Juno. Mara Juno. We're under orders to return you. She stared at the message for a long time. Then turned to Sylvan. They'll destroy this place, she said. Cut it down. Claim it. He nodded once. Sad. Resigned. It always happens. Not this time. You'll lose everything. She looked up. Eyes fierce. Then we fight for something worth losing. They rewrote the access codes. Rerouted the beacon into a feedback loop. Planted growth speed catalysts in the central garden to overwhelm any trespassers. But the system couldn't hold forever. The station was dying. And there was only one escape pod. When she told him to take it, he refused. We bloom together, he said, or we root together. But in the end. He put her in the pod anyway. When the walls collapsed and the fire licked the orchid vines and the station groaned like a dying god. He kissed her one last time. Foreheads pressed. A final bloom of golden light between them. I'll find you again, she said, tears streaking her face. I'll be in every garden you touch. And then. The pod launched. And he was gone. She tends gardens now. Across broken moons. On forgotten colonies. In orphan domes. Every time a vine curls around her wrist, she feels him. Every time a flower blooms without cause, she whispers his name. And sometimes, when the stars go quiet, she swears she hears a hum in the roots. We bloom where stars fall. And where love is planted, it always finds light. Elian Trace had always been good at reading storms. Not the hard science of it, not data feeds and vector algorithms. He knew those too, of course, but his true strength was the unspoken part. The part you felt in your skin. Behind the eyes. Like music without melody. Storm sense, they called it. The instinct for knowing when the winds would turn. When beauty would become violence. When something in the sky was about to break. But what he never learned, what they never taught, was how to read people. How to sense the storm before someone walked away. Or before they fell in love. The first time he saw Haravel, they were standing in the observation ring, watching the eye of Oris churn below them, a vortex of lightning the size of a continent. Haravel stood with hands behind their back, still as silence. They were taller than him. Willowy. Skin marked with faint, drifting whirls of biolight that moved like clouds inside their veins. Their eyes were layered, multiple reflective lenses that caught every flicker of light and fed it back, more beautiful. They didn't speak at first. But they felt present. So Elian tried to impress them the way he usually did. He spoke in metaphors. This storm's like a cathedral of chaos, he said. All vaulting arches and broken prayers. Silence. No reaction. He coughed, awkward. I'm Elian. Still nothing. Until. Haravel, they said, voice quiet as pressure drop. Then they turned away. And he was left wondering whether he'd said too much. Or just not the right things. Over the next 6 days, the station trembled more often. Equipment cracked. Power fluctuated. Atmospheric readings surged and dropped like a heartbeat skipping. We shouldn't be this close to the lower band, Elian argued with his team lead. We're too deep. The crush limit is rising. But he was ignored. They always ignored him until something broke. Haravel was always nearby, watching storms alone. Never eating with the others. Never engaging. Only gazing through the storm glass, like it was a mirror to something Elian couldn't see. On day 8, the containment seals faltered. A burst of ion energy fried the NAV relay. They were stuck. Tetherless. Adrift above a world that wanted to swallow them. And when the crew panicked, Haravel finally spoke. The eye is rising, they said calmly. We are seen. No one knew what that meant. But Elian heard it differently. We are seen. Not by the storm. Not by the planet. By each other. That night, Elian sat in the central ring alone. He traced old storm patterns on the glass with his fingertip. A spiral here. A slash there. Chaos made into shape. You draw weather, said Haravel behind him. He looked up, startled. It helps me focus. Haravel sat beside him. Not close. But not distant either. My people are born in lightning, they said after a pause. We feel emotion through pressure. It's why we stay apart. Too many emotions, and we drown. And me? Elian asked. What pressure do you feel from me? Haravel was quiet. Then. Sadness. Beautifully disguised. He swallowed hard. And didn't deny it. They spent the next few days together. In silence. In symmetry. They charted clouds together. Mapped winds. Haravel began to mirror his gestures. When he sat on the floor, they sat beside him. When he opened a new data file, they leaned in closer than necessary. On day 12, Elian offered them a cup of synthberry tea. Haravel took it with 2 hands. Sipped. Winced. What is that? Bitterness, Elian said with a small smile. With a hint of sweetness if you let it stay on your tongue. Haravel looked at him. Long. Soft. Then said. Like you. On day 14, the storm reached the station. Alarms blared. The lower hull ruptured. The crew scattered. Oxygen reserves dipped to emergency levels. And Haravel found him in the observation dome, still tracing shapes. Why are you not running? They asked. Where would I go? Elian whispered. The escape pods are gone. They stared at him. Their eyes like fractal glass. Then let me show you something. They reached out. Placed one hand on his chest. The other against the storm glass. And Elian felt something shift. Not in the room. Not in the storm. In him. Like a vacuum sealed too long had finally been opened. Haravel's light pulsed. The glass shimmered. And through the window, through the hurricane and the vortex, he saw patterns. His patterns. His sorrow. His hunger to be understood. His fear of being too much, too deep, too strange. And Haravel did not flinch. They leaned in. Rested their forehead against his. And whispered. You are a perfect storm. When the station failed, they didn't die. Not exactly. The eye of Horus engulfed the dome, but instead of crushing it, the wind lifted them. Carried the broken shell of the station like a leaf in God's breath. Later, they would be found adrift, the dome intact, atmosphere stable. No one could explain it. Some said it was a miracle. Others said it was impossible. But Elian said. It was love. And Haravel? They just smiled. And traced a spiral on his palm. A storm without destruction. A love without need for words.